Keygen music can be as deliberately difficult as black metal or esoteric, mysterious guy hardcore, but it can also be a lot more fun. My own personal journey with Keygen music started with a tweet from @DualityJack in 2016. And if there's one thing that this exists is all about, it's making dreams come true, like a couple of years late, maybe every 6 months, whatever works. Up until this tweet sent me down a rabbit hole, Keygen music was one of those things, I had heard of, but I hadn't heard, which is a way of saying I really didn't know that much about it, but I didn't want to sound like a total fool. But then you hear it, and you remember, yes, this is the sound of crime. Keygen music is based in 80s and 90s hacker culture, which I'm obviously very intimately connected to and knowledgeable of because of my extensive exposure to the film Hackers, which I am sure is a fantastically realistic depiction of the era of which I am now prepared to pontificate for you. Qualified. Crews back then were competing to crack software, and this created a culture of healthy competition. And from that sprang the introduction of crack introductions, crack intros, or Cracktros, which would be built by crews in front of their pirated software to pump their shit, to call out members of the crew who had done the work, and to disrespect their enemies. Early Cracktros were just private graffiti. There'd be a name scroll, maybe a simple animation, but they progressed along with technology. And as more and more home PCs came with sound chips, music was added, and visuals started becoming more and more elaborate, and eventually an entire scene around crack intros grew separate from the idea of just pirating software. This was called Demoscene, in which crews would build the most exciting and inventive visual and sound thing for cool reasons. Music in Cracktros was made possible by mod files, which were easy to program with esoteric music tracking software. And whereas a WAV file or an MP3 file, which did not exist at that time, would have been way too big to fit on the floppy disks that were, where pirated software lived, a mod file could feature a 3-minute song in 20 kilobytes, using just a single sample that could be repitched and rearranged, or the sine, square, and triangle waves of everyday sound chips that were all of a sudden present in home PCs. This sound, this limitation, this computer-based sound is the essence of what we now know as chiptune. And through this developing technology for sound and the simultaneously explosive growth of what you could do visually on home computers, Demoscene was born. Separate from cracking and pirating software, this was just about the Cracktros, just about impressing other crews with just how good you were at building a thing. Demoscene allowed crews to flex for each other, showing what was possible with new technology for an audience of other creative computer nerds. And as cracked software transitioned from being exchanged on floppy disks to exchanged via torrents, often programs would come with a key generation program that would allow you to open up your copy of Microsoft Office that you needed to make your computer homework look good and professional. And inside of those key generating programs was music culled from Demoscene. All of a sudden, Keygens became the largest platform for the distribution of music that had previously been limited to a tiny community of hackers making music for other hackers. Now, normies like me were able to hear music that had previously been restricted to those who knew that Hackers was not a realistic portrayal of hacker culture. I was joking off the top about black metal, but I do think the comparison is apt. First of all, there's an inherent criminal element, but there's also the idea that this music is built for a very specific community that will understand the rules and the structure of the music. And sometimes when outsiders are piled into it, it can be very confusing and perhaps problematic. And ultimately, all of this work, all of this creativity is in service of bettering that community, of building up a scene that's really not for anyone else. Whether that's Cracktros or whether that's, burning down a church and making a song that's just like... It may have been a few years, but I guarantee the sound of some of these songs will ring a very nostalgic and criminal part of your heart bells. And you can check out some of the best of Keygen music in an amazing article and a comp from Nest that is linked in the description. And I think some of it will feel very familiar to you. And even though the heyday of Cracktros and Demoscene and Keygen music may be over, I would argue that the spirit still continues in artists who build up these walls and create very specific environments for you to listen to their music in. My favorite current example of this is a band from Toronto called Camboys. Just to see if I can get away. I'm on the run and on a Saturday. Make me feel like I can levitate. Camboys' debut EP is called Wild City, and the only way for you to play it is to play the video game that they made to go along with it, where you are the titular Camboys trying to get to a gig, but you're being stopped by longboarding lizards, and you have to power up by getting hamburgers on your way to the gig. But there are 5 songs contained within the levels of this video game, and you have to go through the 5 levels of the game in order to listen to them. It's not a direct one-to-one comparison with Keygen music, but the idea that you are forced to be in a specific place in front of your computer to hear what, it was definitely a lot of work, seems very spiritually connected to that spirit of the 80s and 90s. This makes sense in so many ways for a modern audience to consume music. So much of our creativity is attached to our computers. It comes from and through and around and is all about these machines that control our lives. And so whereas mostly we experience our music on our phone on our commute or on our phone waiting for the bus so we can begin our commute, to force someone to listen to something in a very specific place, doing a very specific task, whether that's stealing Photoshop or playing your video game, is a really interesting idea and changes the way that you experience that music. This is not going to be a surprise for any of you because I have a YouTube channel, but I am guilty of searching for praise and recognition for just about every tiny thing that I do. And so it's interesting to me that there are people in this world who want to put all of that work into something creative, whether it's a song or a video game, and then wall it off so that not everyone has immediate access to it, but anyone with the right set of curiosities is able to experience it exactly how you wanted them to. So you can check out Wild City from Camboys in the description and maybe get a sense of what it was like to steal something without stealing it, and hear some good music without having to steal something. What do you think? Do you see the spirit of Cracktros and Demoscene and Keygen music in any modern music? Or is it just the homage and the tip of the hat of bands like Anamanaguchi? Let me know what you think in the description, and be sure to subscribe for new episodes of This Exists from time to time. Be excellent to each other.